we're in a phase of what feels like really rapid development in AI.
Our students will be using AI in their everyday jobs.
We must educate people about AI development.
We have to support our learners to become critical consumers, mainly because there's just too much to lose.
Welcome back to the Hello World podcast, a show for educators interested in computing and digital making. I'm James Robinson, computing educator and aspiring AI aficionado.
Hello, I am Ben Garside, a senior learning manager at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, former classroom teacher of computing, and enthusiastic yet amateur prompt engineer. So James, I'm very excited to be here today with you and the guests, because in this episode, we're exploring an area that has a lot of people talking at the moment. And as ever, we really value your comments and feedback, which you can share at helloworld.cc/podcastfeedback.
Thank you, Ben. And as you say, this week we're discussing a really interesting topic and a really relevant topic at the moment. We're looking at the landscape of AI and its role in the classroom. Ben, you've been working on lots of AI content for the Foundation recently for the last 2 years. How would you summarise the current landscape of AI as it is today? And obviously this might change tomorrow, but right now, what's the landscape look like?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I think the first thing to recognise is that we're in a phase of what feels like really rapid development in AI. I think certainly since ChatGPT became a thing, it really has made us sit up and pay more attention to, I think, the opportunities that AI can bring, but also being a little bit more aware of it, the risks behind it. But the first thing I like to tell people is that, AI has been around for actually quite a while. I mean, it was the 1950s when the famous British mathematician Alan Turing proposed this idea of thinking machines. And he thought that we would have achieved real artificial intelligence. I mean, what I mean by that is when computers have true human-like abilities, when we wouldn't be able to tell if we were actually talking to a human or a machine. So you might have heard of the Turing test, and you might have actually done this with the students in your classroom. But let me tell you, James, I think that Turing test is completely blown out of the water. I think if I didn't know I was talking to a chatbot, with things like ChatGPT or Bard, they could do a really good job of convincing me that I was talking to a human. So I think that brings me back to a really important point, is that we must educate people about AI development so that, we know they can be convincing, but they don't have human-like capabilities. ChatGPT can't drive my car or, train my dog how to play fetch. I'm not particularly great at those things either, to be honest with you, but it's a good simile. Actually, we've done a lot of work at the Foundation about the language we use when talking about AI and machine learning. We avoid what's called anthropomorphization. And what I mean by that is when we attach human-like capabilities to things that aren't human, and we think that's really important, particularly around talking about AI and when young people are developing their mental models of this AI world that they're in at the moment, so that they don't see their smart speaker at home as being human, or even though it sounds and, speaks like a human being, so we think that if young people see these machines as human-like, then it just risks them missing the fact that it's actually humans who make these systems, humans who are responsible for their outputs. And we want to empower people to look under the hood of these machines, maybe want to play a role in the future development of these systems, but, as a minimum, just feel empowered to, question any unfairness that they might be victim to. So James, that's my opinion. You've been less close to this work that we've been doing. What's your perspective? Have you used any cool AI applications recently?
I mean, I think you're just to pick up on a couple of points there, but I think you're right. Things are moving very, very quickly, and if you're not kind of really immersed in this space, it can be quite hard to kind of keep up. I've trialed out a few different kind of applications and tools for doing various bits of, or sort of doing a bit of heavy lifting for me in certain places. So I think in a previous episode I've spoken about using it to help me write some sort of a template for some code that I've then had to go in and adapt and fix, and that's been a really useful application of AI, as well as analysing texts and potentially drafting text as well. But I find that it always requires that little bit of, at the moment it still requires that additional human intervention to kind of validate, verify, to make sure that you're getting the output that you want. And I was just thinking as you were talking about, like outside of work, I found it's a really niche, but it's a really helpful application of AI. So as you know, Ben, I'm a real big fan of Lego, and I do lots of kind of Lego sorting and sifting and identifying of bricks. And as I get a little bit older, my eyesight is not great, so I can't read the little numbers printed on the Lego bricks. And so there is an app that you can use on the computer which identifies the Lego brick. So you hold the Lego brick up, you take a picture, and it tells you, here are the 5 things that I think this could be, and you can very quickly identify it, which is really great for like slight variations in faces on Lego minifigures and that kind of thing. So that's a really fun kind of application where I've seen that really kind of enhance something that I'm trying to do outside of work. We should probably, though, stop talking about Lego and things. It's not the Lego podcast after all. We should invite some of our guests on. First of all, joining us is Helen Copson, an ex-head of music and now subject leader for computer science and media at Co-op Academy in Priesthorpe in Leeds. Helen, my first question, I guess, is where are you seeing AI being used in the classroom now?
Well, we're teaching it through lessons. So we've got the Raspberry Pi AI unit. We're teaching to year 9. And in year 8, we've done some work with the Teachable Machine with Google, which falls into one of the other schemes of work. In terms of teaching and learning, loads of us are looking at TeachMate AI to plan curriculum and lessons and mark things together. And AI is actually we've got a whole strategy now as a multi-academy trust. How is AI going to manifest across the curriculum and in all areas?
And maybe we could just delve in a little bit deeper into that. Like, so when you talk about teaching your students about AI, using the resources that from Raspberry Pi and other sort of resources, what are the sort of what parts of AI are you exploring through that? What's the focus been for you in what you've been teaching the learners about AI?
To ask them essentially to begin with, what do they think AI is? And largely it comes back with AI is more intelligent than humans. And no, AI is only as intelligent as humans. It's just more logical. And then looking maybe like with year 8, which is our 11 to 14, so 12, 13, we looked at the Teachable Machine and we taught it to recognise gender. So we did male, female. We took pictures of all the kids in the classroom. We have an Asian population, more Asians, 60%. And we tested the model. We're also boy heavy. And it could recognise boys and girls quite easily. It recognised me as a girl. When a boy put a blazer over his head, it recognised him as a girl because it associated the blazer with a headscarf. So it's that bias that's built in because there's not enough data in the models at the moment, and looking at bias in AI as well, and the pitfalls of AI, not to trust it so much. It may be those kind of models.
And then you talked a little bit there about sort of not just the sort of teaching of AI sort of to students or teaching students about AI, but using it as part of your teaching and learning. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit later on when we introduce our second guest as well. But how have you identified, like, whereabouts is AI having an impact on the teaching and learning, or how you approach teaching and learning? You mentioned TeachMate. Like, what are the things that you're using AI for those that might not be familiar with this?
So TeachMate, you tell it what subject you want or what scheme of work you want, how many lessons you want. You pop it in and voila, you have a scheme of work that you can adapt to your own setting, your own year groups, etc. And planning and preparation is now so much easier. Using ChatGPT, we can now give feedback that sounds a lot better than it used to, or write reports. So give it a bit of data and it can give us an output that we can use to inform parents, can write minutes, can reword documents. I've used it for some of the case studies in business, and then we do Key Stage 5, the Cambridge Technical. When the case studies come out for the Unit 2, we've put it into ChatGPT to see what questions it comes out with, and then the students can base their responses around those questions using the case study. So it gives them a bigger platform, because they can't use it in the exam because they can't take it, but it gives them those thought processes of points. In terms of office and ideas and things like that, it's going to revolutionise how data input is going on, how we send emails, how we mail merge. It's going to make it so much easier.
So you've seen, you've obviously used it in a really great way, these kind of like these large language model tools. I'd imagine that your students are also very enthusiastic about using these tools. So how have you seen them using it? Have they made any mistakes? And how have you gone about teaching them how to use these tools appropriately?
When we did the whole class model, they were really like, oh, take my picture. They think it's great, think it's hilarious. When we looked at fruit, they only used a few images, and then the computer didn't know that a green apple, or the AI didn't know a green apple was the same as a red apple. And they kind of started seeing, but it's going to need so much data to get this right. But then also in their heads, they think it's programmable. They think it's instructions rather than data-based. So when we talk about chess, they go straight in to say, well, that's an algorithm. That's just a set of rules. It's not. That's a set of data. And when you look at how much data's in that chess model, it's just, there's more bits of data in that than there are atoms in the universe. Their mind is like, what? That's how much data it needs to be able to win. So then they think actually AI isn't where it needs to be yet for us to use.
So have your students used ChatGPT to do their homework, for example?
It's banned in school, so they can't access it. Teachers can, so I've modelled it in lessons. So we were looking at like paraphrasing using media or getting citations and things, and how to paraphrase or getting definitions. And we asked this massive question, or we asked a question like, give me a definition for, I think it was networks or networking, and it brought out 3 paragraphs, and all it needed was the first sentence. So I said, look, if you're going to use this, it's great, it's going to give you all the answers, but you need to be able to unpick what the information is that you need. And then that's how you're going to use AI, because ultimately, whilst I've never had to use AI in my whole career or childhood, our students will be using AI in their everyday jobs. It's just how they use it effectively, the same way we teach them how to safely navigate the internet.
Okay, so I think it's time to welcome our second guest. So I would like to welcome Dr. Jane Waite. Jane is a senior research scientist at the Raspberry Pi Computing Education Research Centre, a joint initiative between the University of Cambridge and the Raspberry Pi Foundation. So Jane was a developer for 20 years and a teacher for 10 years, and now research computing education. On AI and machine learning, she and her team have conducted various research studies in the area, including looking at teaching resources, developing models to help with teaching and learning, and exploring how large language models can be used to provide explanations of programming error messages. So, Jane, you and I have worked quite closely together over the past 2 years, and I know that you've done a lot of work in the AI education space. Now, I was at the BET show recently, and AI was the hot topic. But, to me, it felt as though people were sometimes talking about AI in education in very different ways. Is there a way of framing or categorizing what we mean when we talk about AI in education?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this subject. And I just actually want to say to Helen, I'm from Leeds, so I'm from Middleton originally, so I'm really quite excited to be talking to someone else from Leeds. But going back to your question of how might we categorise this topic, I think, and this is very difficult for me as well, because I need to use my hands to kind of explain these overlapping circles. I think, first of all, there's productivity. So Helen was talking there about how AI can be used with TeachMate and other products in order to write reports or answer emails or do all of those kind of improving teacher productivity. So that's one kind of pancake in the mix. There's in this next thing again that Helen was talking about, AI literacy. How do we help students to learn about the, AI being fair, accountable, transparent? How can we have the use of AI, being critical consumers? And so that's, maybe we call that AI literacy. So that's the next kind of pancake that sits next to our first productivity one. There's something then that is specific about each and every subject. And if I talk about teaching computer science, but of course, as Helen said, it could be about business or history or art. But if we think about teaching about computer science and potentially specifically about programming, we can also use these kinds of tools in order to support students as they're sitting and learning. So like as a more knowledgeable other that is sitting in the classroom with them as a kind of a super TA, or maybe not such a good TA. And I think that's the important thing, is how can we change pedagogy in order to use these tools to support the teaching and learning of programming. Now, when I say programming, I mean the normal kind of programming that we already teach, so procedural programming with Python or object-oriented or so on. So there's that whole thing of how we might change pedagogy, and that might be if you use PRIM at the moment, which is this predict, run, investigate, modify, make, what might PRIM plus AI look like? And as well as that, there's curriculum changes that need to sit at the back of that, because we're going to have to teach children how to use prompt engineering. That's a new topic for them to learn. It's a new thing to go on that list of all the things that the DFE want us to teach. And also about feedback literacy, because these kinds of tools, they're just massive prediction machines. Garbage in, garbage out. And there will be hallucinations. It won't always be accurate. So how do we support students to change their mental models? Just as you said, Helen, they used to think in terms of algorithms. It's always going to be accurate. It's always going to have the same result. But now it's data-driven, it's probabilistic. So there's this thing around what's called feedback literacy. And then there's another pancake. So we've got these 3 pancakes so far, and now we've got a 4th pancake. And out of the back of AI literacy, we move into data science. So will computer science teachers actually be teaching data science next? And will it not be developing programs that use procedural programming languages, but that actually are interacting with large language models, where you're going to have to tune your embeddings or all these technical things? So we're moving from this computational thinking 1.0 to a brand new version of computational thinking, entirely changing the way that students, right from being 5, 6 years old, as they're interacting with these new kinds of technologies, they have to think in a really different way. So I think there are 4 pancakes for me. And in a sense, I think at the moment, teachers are just looking into this big vat of mixture, of pancake mixture. I think it is Pancake Day soon. And so I think it's all muddled up. And often when I hear teachers talking about things, there's a bit of productivity, there's a bit of AI literacy, there's a bit of data science. But anyway, that's the way that I think about it. And if that's useful for others, then that would be really cool. So Ben.
Yeah, I mean, my mental model is a little bit stuck on pancakes now. And it's getting towards dinner time, so... You talked about this computational thinking 2.0, and I know that's based on research. I'm always fascinated by how the research community keeps up with the pace of AI development. So how do you go about that?
I'm going to be absolutely honest. It's like the Wild West right now. We can't keep up with it. I'm reviewing for a conference at the moment. So we kind of, if you imagine what happens is people write lots of papers, they all get submitted to a conference, and then other people have got to review them. And 2 years ago, I never had papers to review about AI and machine learning. I think it's something like 10-15% of the papers are AI and machine learning. We've put a paper in for that. It's just, so much research is going on, but mostly it's in higher education. So it's really is in universities where this is an enormous problem. So as Helen was saying, it's banned, for younger learners. It is not banned in higher education, or they try, but students are just using these tools in order to complete their summative as well as formative assessment tasks. So it's a massive issue in HE. So how do we keep up? Well, we're not really. It's just a really fast moving area of research.
But are we going to get to the point where they're not going to have to write a dissertation anymore? This is not where we're ending up.
Excellent question. Absolutely brilliant question. So this is much the talk in higher education about how assessment is going to change. And it's interesting. So I'm from Queen Mary originally. That was the university, Queen Mary University of London. And luckily, much of our assessment for our 500 students who kind of turn up on day one to do intro to Java programming, it's not just creating the same kind of program. They have to actually explain every single stage that they go through. They have to go and talk to a TA and explain their program. And they have to explain we use another theory for that called semantic waves. But they have to explain what they're doing. So it is, even if they were to use say Copilot, ChatGPT, any of these tools, they would have to be able to explain what that's doing, and hopefully, they're not just listening in one ear to what Copilot's telling them, kind of thing. But that was very anthropomorphized, so I apologise.
I think it's really interesting how we've gone from a place almost maybe even in the last 12 months of being worried about these tools and thinking how are they going to replace what we're doing, to now actually thinking how can we use this to augment the work that we're doing. For example, with teaching programming, it's not that they're going to replace this need to program, but now people are thinking, how is this going to help the pedagogy that we already apply? How we can use AI to help us with Parsons problems, for example, when learning to program. I think that's really great. And, you touched on it then. It's not thinking that, the genie, there's a common phrase, the genie is out the bottle, it's there. So it's about how do we adapt to that? So, yeah, assessment will need to change. And I think that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. But it's how we can make the best use of these tools and how we can adapt our own practices around that.
Talking about how assessment models change, and my music head on, I've had a lot of conversations with people saying, with art teachers or musicians, are we dumbing down creativity? But in fact, are we going the other way? We have to be more creative in our assessment models because we have to demonstrate the understanding in a creative way to show that whilst their dissertation could be written, or piece of work, they need to be able to show the working through it, and then that brings back creativity. So AI, in fact, is not getting rid of creativity, but making us more creative.
And I think that's true of almost any innovation, right? Any innovation causes you to need to be a bit more creative in how you kind of adapt to it. But I think AI is proving to be such a far-reaching and you can use it for so many things that it's really challenging lots of different sort of aspects of how we teach, how we learn, all at the same time. Jane?
I was going to agree that it is about us as educators taking responsibility and not just letting it happen. We have to support our learners to become critical consumers, mainly because there's just too much to lose. So becoming critical consumers and taking responsibility is really important, because otherwise students are going to be facing an incredibly biased world where, fake news and is already going to influence the elections that are coming up both in the UK and the States. And I think there's a real risk around us almost as having a degree of apathy that the pedagogy will sort it out, and that students actually will gain lots of learned helplessness, and that they'll miss lots of kind of important stages in building mental models. And I think that's already starting to happen in HE, where they see students then coming through to their final exams and they can't do what they need to do. So I think creativity, yes, but pedagogy, that's the really most important thing right now.
You touched on the ethics. In fact, you talked about the dangers of AI, and with year 9, 13-year-olds, 14, they said this week, introducing AI, and we were talking about the Taylor Swift news story at the weekend, how AI had used her figure and objectified women, etc. And one of the girls just went, why aren't we stopping this? Why aren't we pausing? Why aren't we waiting? And if you've got a 13, 14-year-old girl going, this is going way too fast for us, we need to stop, then I'm scared for their future more than mine.
It's a good point. I think things are moving so fast, and it is really hard to keep pace. And if we're having challenges keeping pace as professionals, like imagine what the world is like for the young people who are, seeing all of this sort of happen. I wanted to kind of bring us back a little bit to something we started talking a bit about earlier on, and I think it's sort of concepts and language. I think are really important in this space, and it kind of connects a little bit with, I think, one of the things that I reflect on as someone who designs kind of curricula and oversees learning experiences. I think, being really purposeful about what we're trying to learn. And I think once we understand what we're trying to teach and learn, we can then think about the core concepts. We can think about the pedagogy and be very deliberate in the way that we present those ideas. Something like that you mentioned earlier on, Jane. When I framed computing with my learners, I often talked about systems being very deterministic, right? And that was almost like a nice safety net. Everything's deterministic. You put some rules in, you get reliable answers out. And now that's kind of just gone out the window. And so we've got to not only unchange our thinking, but we've actually got to unpick that a little bit with the learners. And then I think we made a reference to language as well earlier on. So it'd be really interesting to hear everyone's views on, like, what are the sort of the really important concepts that we need to be getting across in this? And then also, what's the role of language? Who wants to come in on that?
Can I just start by giving us a framework to talk about this? Because I love a nice framework. As everybody knows, I like a diagram.
Is it more pancakes, Jane? Or
no, this is layers. So
layers?
It could be layers of a cake. Yeah, let's do layers of a cake.
Cakes and pancakes.
So this is called the See-Me model, which is based on some work that I did with, again, Paul Curzon at Queen Mary. And it's this idea that at the top of the cake, you've got social and ethical. So it's all the things that Helen was talking about with the students saying, come on, stop, this is too much with the fake news and with the kind of way that images are being representative of celebrities. Then you've got the applications that we build. So the next layer of the cake, so I don't know what flavour you would have at the top, vanilla, then chocolate. Then you've got the applications that you build. So it's interesting because the applications we build will be a combination of both rule-based and data-driven. They will call both algorithms, but they'll also call these models that may sit beneath them. So as programming teachers, we're going to have students who can sit with both a CT1, so computational version, 1.0 in their head, and also this probabilistic and this kind of data-driven view of the world in their heads. So we have all these different applications, and then we move down into the model layer. And that's where, we hoover up data, or we create data that we can use to train a model, test a model, and we go through the kind of and I really do like then the life cycle that we've got in the Experience AI resources to kind of support that thinking. Then at the bottom, we've got the kind of the most dense layer. I don't know what this layer is made of, maybe licorice or something really heavy duty at the bottom. And that's the engine. And we've called it the engine on purpose to say it's a machine. It's this mathematical, it's the mathematical expression of neural networks and other types of models as they're implemented. And we might do lots of unplugged activities in order to teach that layer. So in terms of, there's the See-Me, we might have language, which is different according to what level we're at. And we're definitely going to have different concepts at those levels. So See-Me, I think, is quite a useful way if we're talking about what concepts do we need to teach, what language are we going to use, and what pedagogies, because there might be different pedagogies. It might be all discussion up in the vanilla level, and it might be unplugged and kind of quite different ways to learn about the engine.
And there was... I was listening to everything, Jane, but there was one particular bit that caught my attention in there that was sort of resonated, because we've spoken before about the See-Me model as well. So, but I think the bit about students sort of switching between, right? And I think that's when we think about programming, traditional rule-based programming, we use the levels of abstraction framework to help students move up and down the different types of activities that are involved in programming, from design all the way down to execution and testing. And I think, you can see parallels both within the See-Me model. So you've got these different layers, but then also I think you've got this moving between the two quite seamlessly. And I think that is going to be a really interesting challenge for our learners, for our next generation of learners, to be able to, float up and down the levels of abstraction, move up and down the See-Me layers, and jump between those two, within the space of 20 minutes potentially. That is going to be, it's going to require really careful and explicit scaffolding from educators to help them navigate that shifting kind of between those two.
I think this has to start in primary school, because at the moment we've got learners that can't do a Google search successfully. So they'll never be able to use an AI model easily because they can't even use search terms. But it's not happening in primary school. They're learning Scratch in primary school, which is not helping navigate AI.
And I think that's a really important question, because I think, and we'll come on to that in a moment, I think, but I think this, like, well, actually, we can maybe address this now. Like, how do teachers sort of embark upon this? And at what point do we all think we should be engaging with AI? What are the safety concerns? What are the things we should be learning at a primary age? Like, where do we all kind of sit on that? I'm going to go to Ben first, actually, because I realise I've not gone to Ben for a little while. Ben, what's your thought on that?
Well, I think the first kind of myth to debunk is to think that maybe this is a subject for computing, because I don't think it is. I think, we look at in the future and think about how AI is going to affect all, most industries, most jobs. I think that's something to factor in, that, finding time in curriculum-based computing we can do, but I think there's also a lot of space where this actually fits into so many different subject areas. And we created a lesson on AI and biology, for example, but certainly there's areas in things like PHSE and art and music. All these have got really strong links to AI where there's opportunities for us to talk about it. But to go to the other part to your question about when do we introduce this, I think as early as possible, as early as young people are starting to interact with the world around them. When they're starting to build their mental models of the world, I think it's important that we start introducing things. And if we look at, Jay and See Me model, it doesn't mean we need to delve straight into, with 5-year-olds and talk about the engines, the licorice level, as Jane called it. I think we need to start thinking about those social and ethical issues, introduce them. And Helen, you mentioned with your students about them questioning those things that they're seeing with Taylor Swift. There's a great conversation to have with them, whether that be informed time or, anytime you're speaking to young people, start those ethical and, conversations with them and encourage them. If they're having those conversations and they're questioning these things, that's really important and a really good thing, because they're going to play a part in the future. We want to empower young people to question these decisions, question these models that are being created, and not just accept the reality around them.
You can't believe how much I agree with you, Ben. And I think it is the CT 2.0. I think we've not done too bad a job getting the idea of computational thinking into some primary schools. But I think it's going to be quite shocking, because suddenly we've got this new idea of of another version. But children are using Alexa and other tools. They are maybe using language which is highly anthropomorphized and seeing them as being trusted, knowledgeable, and they, others rather than objects, not understanding that the output can be entirely fabricated and can be manipulated. The safeguarding issues are, it kind of makes me kind of feel a little bit shivery to think about how students, very young learners, can be manipulated through these kinds of tools. So I think, we've got to start as soon as they're in schools. It's an early years issue as well as a key stage 1, so that's students who are in kindergarten, who are like 4 and 5 years old. But it is at the top. It's a social and ethical. So in terms of the cake, it's like a cake that's got a tiny, tiny point at the bottom and then a great big vanilla bit at the top.
So we've now got a triangular cake slice.
Correct.
Layered with licorice in the middle.
At the bottom, licorice at the bottom.
Yeah. We've mentioned anthropomorphization, if I've said that word correctly, a couple of times. And I know, Ben, from like observing you kind of immersing yourself in this world of AI over the past year and a half, whatever it's been, I've seen you kind of correct yourself and develop your way of speaking about AI in particular. So for our listeners that maybe aren't quite sure what the issue is in relation to anthropomorphization, what are the kind of the key kind of trip hazards, as it were, when you're describing an AI system that you should be mindful of as you're talking about it, things that you constantly or have routinely tripped up on?
Yeah, I think my worst mistake is keep on referring to it as this countable noun. Saying it as an it. You wouldn't say kind of like the biology, but we do say the AI. So, we need to, what I tell people to use is slightly move away from these human-like terminology. So when we're talking about smart speakers, for example, it's very easy for us to describe a smart speaker as listening or hearing. And, there is an argument you could say maybe they do, but I think for young people, with what we're doing there is giving a human-like characteristic there. So rather than using words like, hears or sees, we should be using terminology like it detects, it takes inputs, it pattern matches, it generates. So we're not really using technical language, but we're using language that's, not human-like, if that makes sense. And even when we're describing, maybe how AI systems are built, rather than saying that this AI does this, we can say they are designed to do this, or developers have made an AI system that does this. So you're adding in the human element, and it makes them realize that it's humans that are behind these systems and we have control over them. So yeah, so it's a simple guidance, really. But like I say, even though I've been talking about this for probably 2 years now, I still make the mistake. So don't give yourself a hard time about it. But I would say that if you're talking to young people and you hear them do that, you hear them give a human trait to them, just pick them up on it and go, does it actually see? Just ask that question, and does it listen? Just so you're putting that seed of doubt, and it makes them think about how does it actually work.
It's about that purposeful intent, isn't it? Like you're going to make mistakes, but just be mindful of it as you're making the mistakes.
Yeah, and I think for educators, it's, we model the use of language in every single subject. We talk about phonemes, we talk about graphemes, and I think this is a place for posters that have got input, process, output, and then a big cross through the brain that is normally shown. No more eyes, no more ears being shown on these posters, no more kind of robots that seem to have particular kind of intentions. They're just machines, and this is a machine that takes an input, and based on vast amounts of data there is an output, and that output is merely a prediction. And I think that thing of it's a prediction based on input, and it's a bet, it might be right, might be wrong, whether the output is accurate or not. So I think it is going back to the input-output process model almost, to kind of simplify our language around it rather than anthropomorphizing.
I think we are completely up against it, though, don't you? Because science fiction loves a robot, loves a walking, talking robot. But we spoke to one of the people we've worked with at Google DeepMind, and she said when people find out that she works in AI, the most common question she gets asked is Skynet going to become a real thing?
I'm actually, because I was a primary teacher, and I know how well children learn about genres in language, in literacy. They know the difference between a fact book and a fiction book. So we can teach this. I think, as educators, we can do amazing jobs, and the children learn about genre. Genre theory is a great big kind of area that we've used really effectively in the teaching of literacy. And yeah, so I think we can do this. But as James says, it just needs really careful thoughts.
A child's first experience of AI is through a device. Like my 3-year-old will ask Alexa to play Baby Shark repeatedly. Yeah, absolutely. Then my 10-year-old will use Alexa to tell the weather and use it in a different way. When you go into school, we're teaching it in a 11 to 14 curriculum. When I asked them, where's AI used? And that's part of the Raspberry Pi, the first lesson, is this AI? They thought a spreadsheet was AI because it worked out the maths. Spreadsheet's a calculator. Netflix didn't use AI. But then they can't see it because they only see it as that humanist model. So by teaching them that it's everywhere, it's in everything you do, and it's not in a spreadsheet because that's a calculator.
Can I go back as well to primary? In primary, we would go around with a little label and go, is this a computer? Is this a computer? Is this alive? It's like we need to go back to those initial activities where we have a little piece of cardboard or a little sticky note, and we start to label things and say, this uses a large language model. This calls an AI. It's like really... We can do it, though. I really do believe we can do it, but we just need lots and lots of pedagogy, lots of teacher training and some brilliant resources. So lots of teacher training.
It's like it's skipped a generation, technology. Like I'm that little generation that was born analog and grew up digital, and then everyone missed that bit, and now they're all digital and they haven't got a clue, and now we've got AI, and it's a whole nother new world.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, and it's just the current new world we're dealing with. Let's not talk about quantum computing and other things that might change the world again in this episode. But yeah, thank you, everyone. I personally found that conversation really interesting and engaging, and I've taken away quite a lot of thoughts about AI and its place in education. So if you, our listeners, have a question for us or a comment about our discussion today, then you can email via podcast@helloworld.cc, or you can tweet us at helloworld_edu. My thanks to Jane and Helen for sharing their time, experience and expertise with us today. So Ben, what did we learn today?
Well, I always get a lot from listening to classroom practitioners who are actually using AI with their classes. And I think like any teacher does, it's about experimenting and trying out new ideas, constantly refining them as well. And I don't know about you, James, but even like minor things like speaking to my colleagues at the Raspberry Pi Foundation and hearing about what kind of prompts that they use when they're using ChatGPT kind of really helps me learn and get new ideas. So, but as we've talked about today, I think it's really important that we do so from this position of knowledge and are like mindful of the risks. But my takeaway message to everyone listening is just to have a go, talk to your colleagues and share best practice. And I'm going to go away and make one of Jane's vanilla chocolate and licorice cakes.
I would say yummy, but I'm not entirely sure. No, I think my takeaway, if anything, is that most ideas in computing, we can describe AI through the role of food.